So, good evening to everyone. And on behalf of ET BrandEquity and AirtelIQ and Airtel Business, extending a warm welcome to all of you here. And we've had some exciting conversations there, but let's bring it back here to kind of cap off the theme for this evening, which is about serve to sell and powering growth with relevant audiences. So this is a very sort of what can I say, a very broad theme, so to speak. And this is part of a sort of a series of engagements we are doing with marketing leaders across the board to understand a few things. I mean, you're practitioners in your organizations, and it's upwardly businesses everywhere. So it's not rocket science for me to sort of start off to say that, customer expectations and customer engagement and the whole idea of CS has undergone a huge transformation in the last few years, and more so in the course of the pandemic. So the last couple of years have been defining changes in the way you have looked at customer engagement. And of course, tech has played a small and a very big role in the way you have engaged with customers. So what has really changed, and what is the dynamic that the new age customer has driven you as marketing leaders to re-look the dynamic of customer engagement, and what are those things that have still been a roadblock for you, and what are those things that you are re-looking at, be it in terms of tech or in the way you're going back and conversing, or how are you understanding customer journeys in your organizations, in your industries, and what is it that you have brought back, or what is it that you're looking at to learn from your peers here, will be part of this session. And very quickly, so that we can get good structured voices here, let's quickly do a round of, we have kind of informally broken the ice, but one line of introduction, who you are, and to add a little bit of, fun here, one fun thing about yourselves which we ought to know, or we naturally don't know, and we ought to know about. So just one liner. Let's start off from there. You came in third last, so yeah. Yes.
I'll start. So I'm Sudeep. I am currently working with Wow Skin Science as the VP for growth, taking care of all their platform growths. Very recent here, just moved a month back. Prior to that was Swiggy for about 5 years, leading growth there. One fun fact about me is, can I lie?
No, it's up to you.
We won't know.
We are not going to cross-check. Lie really well.
Okay.
Hello, Sudeep. I'd like to warn you, there's a lady here who does a lot of background check.
I'm a good liar. Okay, that's a fun fact about me.
Okay, so is your name a lie now? Is that
Yeah, it is Sudeep and it's Wow.
Okay, good to see you, Sudeep. Welcome. Okay. Yes.
Hi everyone, I'm Megha. I'm CXO Growth at Meesho. Fun fact about me, I love traveling. It's not as fun as being able to lie, but yeah, so that's about me.
Awesome. So, hello everyone. I'm Ishan. I lead the marketing, sales and PR for CreditBee. A fun fact about me, I don't know how fun it is, but I love being on such forums where I could interact with such enlightened minds. So, not so fun maybe, but that's probably what I can think of at the moment.
Work and pleasure go hand in hand.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Preeti. I'm actually not a marketeer. I'm a business head at Nykaa Fashion. And I lead a couple of businesses there. And the fun fact is that I don't remember names at all. So I'm telling you, even today, I will not remember names. And even later, don't mind it, but I don't remember names. So that's me.
Good. Thank you for being candid.
Problems many of us face, I guess.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Nitin. I lead category marketing for Acco Insurance. Fun fact about me, my name's a palindrome, I guess, so you can read it this way or that way.
Excellent. Yeah. Actually, yes. The palindromic name. Yes, let's jump right here.
Okay, my name is Vaibhav Mehrotra. I lead marketing for cash-free payments. Fun fact, okay, yeah, I hate to be under the spotlight like this. Yeah. But yeah, I think, I was a raw vegan for about a year, which meant I only ate raw vegetables and fruits. That's it. Doesn't sound as fun. But yeah, maybe a trivia.
Great.
Hi, my name is Ojasvi Inda. I am leading marketing for invoice discounting product of Credex. Fun fact about me is if you have any plans on Saturday and Sunday, likely there is an excuse that I'll come up with for cancelling on the plan.
Okay, now we know she does bail out of people. Okay.
We thought she'd say, come join me.
I know.
We're like waiting for that.
Yeah.
I bail out.
Excellent. Yeah, let's move on.
Hi everyone, my name is Vanda. I head marketing, CS and NPD for Fresh to Home. Fun fact about me is I haven't traveled by tractor the last 3 days. Because that's been the con. But,
I think you're winning this.
so yeah, but I don't know if it's fun or it's sad, but yeah. Fun fact, I love dancing. I'm good at ballroom dancing. So,
Okay, lovely. Nice.
and I can lie also.
Yeah. Okay, I know your name. Fine.
Hi, I'm Dushan. For people we haven't met yet, I am from Razorpay. I lead marketing for payments and capital business at Razorpay. Fun fact, share similar issues as Preeti, can't remember names, but I'm a part-time musician. I've been into music and I play and I sing and I've been doing that for a long time, so yeah.
So we can have a song and dance after this. Is it?
Was that what you're looking forward to?
No, I was lying.
A lot of us share the same passion, huh?
That's why she said a lot of marketeers.
We are all equal in that way. Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Smita Murarka. I lead marketing for Duroflex, really trying very hard to make everybody sleep. And the fun fact is actually very crazy categories differently is what I've worked in. So my previous category was a lingerie brand. So from making people wear lingerie to making people sleep. I don't know what next, don't get your minds running, but yeah.
I can venture a guess or two.
Yeah.
Everybody can.
Yeah.
I've got those jokes. So yeah, that's a fun fact.
Great. Hey guys, I'm Hitat Saini. I'm from Frio. Frio is a neobank. The fun fact about me is that I am a dog father of 4 fur babies, and I'm not lying. Yeah.
Wow.
Awesome, nice. So this is a power-packed panel and interesting fun facts. And so since I'm not sure who's telling the truth, because I heard a lot about lying, we'll move on and get to hear some truths as we progress in the discussion. But it's also my privilege to be introducing Mr. Vignesh Narayanan here, who's joined in. He's the CEO of AirtelIQ Ads. So welcome, Vignesh.
Thank you.
And Vignesh also confessed that he came in from the Venice of Bangalore right now. The unaffected Venice of Bangalore. And we are also joined in by Avinash Deepak, who is the SVP Vertical Head ITS and Startups at Airtel Business. So welcome, Avinash. Thank you for joining us. And we're going to sort of jump right into the discussion. Let's see if we can remember any fun facts here. She doesn't remember names, okay? And you love attending forums. You love traveling. He's a liar. Palindromic name. Palindromic name, okay? Hates being in the spotlight. Bails out on people. Hasn't ridden ballroom dancing. And, sorry, Dushyant, wait, hang on. Musician, yes. And she has worked across industries, lingerie being the last one. And
Sleep is the current.
and now currently putting people to sleep, okay? And you're a dog father, right? Of 4, okay.
You've got a good memory.
Not anymore. I'm just trying my luck. Okay, so we'll plunge right into the discussion. So one of the things that is banta hai in a forum like this is to ask marketers like you, So the journey in sort of reaching out and the journey to customer engagement is about messaging, to right audience and right messaging. So I'd like to sort of understand from you, You come from different industries here, some new age, some, a sort of, if for want of a better word, for lack of a better word, brick and mortar industries. So we have a good mix here. And how exactly have you gone about trying to identify your audiences rightly? And what were those hits and misses in the process of identifying your audiences correctly? So I'm putting a very broad question here, but I'm going to direct my first question to Nitin. You are Mr. Palindrome, you are the first person to kind of come with your insights, and we'll take the discussion from here.
Right. So I think like I'll start off with an example from the current organization that I'm a part of, right? Which deals with insurance, right? Insurance is a very low frequency product, right? Like you end up only talking to people at an annual basis, right? Because that's what the cycle is, right? It's also difficult, really difficult for us as an organization to always be on the lookout of, where do you get the right audiences in, because it's not a product of sorts where you have a really sharp idea in terms of who's in market or who's looking to buy your product, etc. Right? So for us, what we've done is given the fact that that we're also tech first, right? A lot of internal data science and internal data modeling is actually what keeps that engine going, right? Of course, so that we have as accurate an idea as possible in terms of what are the right kind of cohorts to go after. We get a lot of incoming traffic, incoming visitors. That's very low intent at the moment that they land, right? So a key part of running the marketing acquisition engine very efficiently is to be able to segment that large chunk of inflow of traffic that actually comes in into buckets, to be able to figure out who to reach out to at what point in time, right? What sort of consumer personas do they fall into, right? And I think that's broadly how we've been able to channelize that part of it.
Sure. And what were your hits and misses in this?
Lots of misses to begin with, right? I think because it's a very large funnel that you're talking about. I think a lot of it took us a lot of time within the organization also to get the right systems, to get the right processes in place. I think the aha moment for us was when we were able to develop an internal CDP, that's a consumer data platform, right, which was able to take in all the signals that we were receiving, right? So like for example, apart from our core products, let's say auto insurance or health insurance, we do a lot of embedded insurances as well. Like for example, when you buy a phone on Amazon, right, you've got Aqua insurance bundled in. When you book a ride on Ola, you've got your trip insurance bundled in. When you say book a bus ticket on Red Bus, you've got travel insurance bundled in, right? So there's a large partner ecosystem that we were able to get into. So like amongst the top e-commerce sites that you name across different sectors, I think the top 2 or 3 players we had an embedded product in that allowed us to get a lot of signals or data about the consumer flowing in, which was very different from the actual product that we were selling. But to be able to harness all of that, pull that into a consumer data platform of sorts, and then use it to run marketing acquisition efficiently, I think that was one of the big aha moments that we've had within our organization.
Sure. Thanks for the opening context around this, and I think that was a fairly industry-specific commentary. But I think as we move along the discussion, we'll get more insights here. May I direct the question now to Dushyant? So, what were your hits and misses, and how you really gone about, kind of identifying your target segments and audiences, and how's your recent journey been, so to speak?
So I think a very different segment, right? Targeting businesses, enterprise SMEs in India. There are by any government estimate, there are about 60 million. So the beauty of the category becomes that you're in a B2B category with a B2C market size. Because you have a B2B marketing playbook which says do account-based marketing, you have a B2C playbook which says do mass marketing, create a brand, and in the middle of both. And the other beautiful thing about it is that the ecosystem in India is continuously pushing us ahead in fintech. It's so much about what NPCI is doing, what the government is doing. We've got UPI, as in the world learns from us in fintech. And that is why so many merchants or so many businesses across India want to digitize, and they're doing pretty well in it. The challenge that comes from us there is, how do you speak the right message to different folks? For example, so many large companies here, if for example, Nike or someone comes to Razorpay, they know the tech as good as us. So the conversations are so intelligent. The conversations are, how does this work? How can you change it? What is the customization for us? And then there is a small homemaker who's a customer of Nykaa who's just starting off their own business. And she's just seen it on Nykaa and she's like, I am an entrepreneur and I need the same power. And there it's not the question of how you're doing it. I just want the tech. And how do you speak to both of these cohorts together? And how do you ensure that comprehension is same for them? Because, we're targeting, there's databases, there's, almost B2B is growing so fast that Facebook, Google, everyone's launched B2B segments to target directly. LinkedIn gives you employee sizes. You can reach all of them. The problem becomes you can't connect with the same messaging to every different business because they're in very different contexts. Someone's becoming a decacorn, someone's starting off, someone's doubling up a job. So I think what we've tried to learn over time is how do we speak to each of them individually.
So personalization.
Exactly, personalization in a sense.
Correct.
And that's always stepwise, right? You start from one big message, and then you go on, and one day you feel like different campaigns are performing well. So probably you've got there. But I think it's a continuous learning journey because we see overlaps in cohorts. It's also about context, apart from demography and psychography, right? What are the context of that business today? So I think that's where we're learning, and obviously more misses than hits.
Sure. Yeah. So I think, this contextualization, now that you kind of brought in this thing, is easier said than done, because I think the granular data that, you need to sort of sift out from the noise of so much of data that you get can be leading and misleading in many times. Because as a user myself, I do realize that I get contextual data, but it's also way off the mark at times. So it doesn't give me the sort of experience that I am looking at. The granularity of the human mind, obviously, that sort of intelligence we haven't gotten to as yet. Yeah. So maybe let's move on a little into the discussion. And did we get to... Yes, sorry, please introduce yourself.
I'm so sorry for being late.
No worries.
I'm Pooja Sharma. I take care of branding in Grow.
Superb. Good to see you. Welcome. Yes, one fun fact. Everybody is given one fun fact about themselves. Yeah, I know.
I missed that question, but can you just repeat the question?
Say one fun fact about you.
Yourself that we ought to know.
Oh, I
Think.
never analyzed myself so critically before.
Okay, so...
but I'm learning pottery, which is a new thing that I'm developing. I don't know if it is fun so much, but it's fun for me at least for now. So
superb, nice. But just be warned, you're sitting next to a...
Oh, is it?
Self-proclaimed.
Everything that he says today, I think we know that.
No. I was lying about lying actually.
Yeah, but he started off very well. Great. So we'll move on from here. So let me now direct the question to Megha here. Megha, so how sort of serious is the idea of you've heard about contextualization and things, certain hits and misses in the process of identifying target audiences. So A, while I do drop that question to you as well, B, I'd also like to understand how serious is the journey of mapping the customer's 360-degree sort of a view? How serious is the data gathering there? And what are your challenges specifically as a marketer in the data gathering journey? So what are your pain points, and what are those top of the recall things that you'd say, you know what, how much ever I try, this is where I hit a roadblock?
Sure. So I think as growth people, one of the biggest things we want is more and more data about our users. The more data we have, the richer consumer expectations, communications, product offerings we can do, right? So data is what we build our empire on. I feel there are three large issues that I feel are some of the big challenges that we face. Number one is this offline-online integration. Ideally, as a growth marketeer, as a growth person, I want to understand my user's journey from an end-to-end perspective. Not just online, which is to say what they're doing on the app or the website or with the product, but also how they're interacting with, let's say, some of the offline things that I'm doing, like my brand campaigns on TV, on print, on outdoor media, or even the social campaigns that I'm doing on Instagram. How do I put all of these things together so that I can see a lucid picture of what are the kind of touch points that goes in before they actually come to the app and buy something? So that sort of an offline-online integration is just not there. So that data is kind of we are blindsided to it. So that's number one. Second, I feel that when I speak to a few companies, I feel there are certain times, there are silos in which growth team works in. Like a branding team is separate, an acquisition team is separate, an engagement retention team is separate, which I feel that just by dividing it like that, we have taken a lot of richness out of the consumer journey, right? A consumer is a consumer is a consumer. All of these are impressions. So we need to understand the holistic picture to be able to create again, like a end-to-end communications and a product offering, right? Third is somewhat you touched upon, that the complexity of the data. All of us, especially the tech ecosystem, we are bombarded with data, right? We have so much. And the same data can have different narratives at times, right? Which is kind of dangerous. So as growth people, it's also very important that we understand that which data is the right data and therefore synthesize and ensure it is used in the right way. So I would say that these three would be the biggest challenge that I see in data.
Correct. So this offline-online thing is actually very interesting, and I think it's a very real problem as well, because we're not able to understand the user journey when the person is not coming on to your specific touch points. So what does he do when he's outside your ecosystem, your immediate digital ecosystem, so to speak? Right? Yeah. But otherwise it can get scarily creepy because there is a last mile tracking of the user journey which happens. Absolutely. Right. Great point that you brought in here. So maybe I'll now direct Smita into the conversation. Your take on this, Smita.
Actually, it's great that you asked me to speak after her, because a lot of what she said as problems is probably something half we've applied as solutions. Not yet fully, because we don't have the data to prove it, but at least the results are kind of signifying. So just a little bit about the brand and the category I'm in. It's a mattress industry by product. We're trying to be a sleep solution company, so talk a lot more about sleep as conversations. The category is 60% unbranded. So a lot of India, maybe a lot of you still don't buy branded mattresses in parts of India. So it's unbranded across price points. It's not only unbranded in a particular low value price point, right? So education becomes a very important stream. Also, I entered the brand just a month before pandemic. And then post that, we didn't have any business to do because we are a purely offline trade-driven brand. And actually pandemic was great. It made my job faster because, we were digitizing the whole brand. And we really set up the Omni strategy. So being a pure trade-driven brand, not even our own store, to today we are the only Omni brand, digital-first brand in the category, which is both offline and online. And how we achieve that is by consolidating all our marketing efforts to say, let's read minimum while there's an ocean of data. And as you rightly mentioned, data is so misleading and over-intellectual trying to make it very, very deep dive and trying to get more out of little data is pointless. So how do you consolidate, and how do you put the whole spends from a funnel perspective and from a journey perspective, and how do you attribute marketing cost to the final ROI and the business, what is the business getting? So that's the simplicity of how we achieved it. We also divided it into journey perspective. So we said that our entire discovery, because it's a category that's getting formed from a knowledge perspective, let's drive it through digital, right? So the entire discovery, which is has a lot of conversations on digital, is happening, that a lot of categories is 80% online. So let's drive discovery across platforms, through digital. And then the conversion can be anywhere. And let's read it like that, right? So of course we don't have a clear data to prove it, but we have some logic around it. And the only challenge that we have today is through our third-party selling places, so the marketplaces online and the trade partners, which is a bulk of the business. The data shareability is not there. So while our D2C channels, which is our own stores and our website, we know the journey, we can tabulate it, we can do 2 + 2 = 4, but the rest of it is a blur. So while we would like to say, yeah, we kind of know what we are doing, we probably still don't know, because they own a lot of the share. And we are also forced to invest in a lot of ways around these silo systems, right? Because it's a chicken and egg story. So you can't consolidate efforts beyond an extent too. So yeah, I think the logic everybody has as marketers, we've realized, like you're saying, I think a year back the conversation was very different, where performance and growth was something all brands were chasing, and that's why those structures were created. I'm glad it's going back to understanding that it can't function like that. But however, while we understand that as marketers, the way the selling systems and processes are designed, it will probably still take some time and effort, and happy to hear, if anybody's cracked this, that how do we really see the journey even at a third-party store from a conversion point of view. But yeah, the logic, as you were saying, probably is a need of our hour for especially tech-based companies too, which can really derive meaning out of it. Yeah.
Correct. I think it's interesting that
it
led to the right sequel here. Good to hear, And I think the pandemic did force you to kind of sort of understand how much of, and you said, you just took the right funneled the right kind of data, you read what made sense to you at that point of time and moved on from there. And you also spoke about performance. So what exactly changed on the performance marketing side for you?
Yeah, so we were seeing performance from a purely last mile conversion. And as I said, because we were reading marketing as an ROI of the complete business, for us the CAC cost was not a cost for the ROI on the internet platforms, but it was an ROI for the overall business, right? That's one. Secondly, we were seeing our reach and our sessions as actually discovery for the brand. So it was not a cost, it was a gain. Then it was about how do we have engagement metrics, how do we really get them back, how do we get them to talk to another consumer. So another interesting thing about our category, which was also different for me when I joined it, was LTV is not a measure at all, because people buy mattress once in 12 years, right? So how do you undo all that you've learned, and LTV is not even relevant anymore, right? So what do you chase? So we came up with new metrics like referrals, brand advocacy, and put a higher weightage on that. To say that I think for marketers, it's important to really wear the category hat more than what you know as an expert, what you've done anywhere else, right? So really understand the category, and yeah, that undoing probably was important too.
Yeah, unlearning and looking at it differently. Great, thanks, Smita. So I'll now move to Ishan. Ishan, further to what, as a sequel to what Smita just spoke about, how are you really looking at optimizing your cost to connect? Now you've identified an audience, say for instance, okay, so I know clearly what I'm going after. So what is your optimal cost to connect? I mean, how are you looking at it? And how are you looking at scaling what you have to offer, to your customers? How are you sort of doing that jig?
Right. So, thank you for that question. First of all, I think some really pertinent points that came up so far in the discussion. Cost, I believe, is nothing but a follow-up of how much efficiency you bring into the system, right? So both of them go hand in hand, essentially. Now, when we look at all these things, which I think Megha and Smita very elaborately talked about, that looking at the data online, offline, bringing all the data together into a singular format, and then processing it very well. So that's where it all essentially begins. And if I can take a step back to the previous question that you asked, which is on the segmentation part and how to go about it, I personally believe there is, instead of calling it as a hit or a miss, right, because that's putting things in a binary format, I think it's a spectrum where you move forward with time, right? So there's always more to do, there's always more that you can achieve out of that, right? So that's something where it all begins, where you identify, you have your product market fit, you know that which is the audience to which your product or your offering caters to, and then you create different segments, you try to identify different ways of segmenting it, and then eventually multiply those segments, and there's an infinite pool that you can get. Secondly, of course, on the relevance of communication that Dushyant talked about, I mean, he spoke more from an enterprise standpoint, but in any context for that matter, to get all that communication very relevant to all the segments that you have come up with, and then bringing all of that data together and then trying to make more sense out of it is where it all begins. I'll go a little deep on the data part. So essentially, when we talk about data, it's mostly the static data that we refer to, right? So the data that we get from the MMPs before the person comes onto the platform, then the data that they provide about themselves once they move on in the journey, and essentially how they what is the data that we derive out of that. So let's say, coming from a fintech background, let's say if we have the PAN of a user, then we can derive certain credit related details about the user and certain other derivatives as well. So all of that is static data, either direct data or derived data. There's a lot of dynamic data as well, right, as to how the user or the consumer is behaving on your platform. What Smita also talked about, that what if we can also get a sense of how the users are behaving on other platforms as well, right? So looking at data, of course, is very obvious on this forum, but I think the next stage is to look at how we can even make sense out of the dynamic data about how the users are going about. If it's an app, then which are the pages that they are going to, what is the intent that they are showing on the platform. So multiplying that further and then trying to process it over a period of time essentially will lead to more efficiency, which in effect, to your question, will help in reducing the costs and optimizing the costs. It's always a journey. I believe there's no perfect solution, there's no perfect consumer journey or a perfect campaign. It's always work in progress, but I think that's the approach that I believe works as per me.
Sure, great.
Yeah.
Thanks much. Sudeep, your take on this. Truth only, yeah?
It's like I'm hearing a lot of data, and while data is good, I'm just thinking that while one part is getting the data, the trouble is how do you really action it into cohorts that are meaningful. We say 1:1 marketing and 1:1 data, and while it works great, but in my experience I've seen that you'll have to abstract at some level. Like at Swiggy, I tried a lot of doing this, reach out to one customer at one point in time, but the context kind of keeps changing so much. For example, going back to the Swiggy example, in the morning I want a dosa, in the evening I want a pizza, for example. What do I communicate you with, right? So while I have the data, how do I make sense of it is a very relevant and important point, I think. Secondly, the point that you were mentioning, right, the silos, how do I break the silos and kind of, actually I can't break the silos, right? So how do I make sense of, what I am doing from an ROI perspective, and how is it impacting the offtakes across the universe? Very, very relevant for D2C brands, for example, because we sell on our own site, we sell on marketplaces, we sell on offline as well. In companies where the platform is single, like Swiggy for example, that's still easier to make sense of it, right? Because the customer is coming to you, the entire journey is there. But in cases of WOW, for example, it's really tricky for us to make sense of what the investments are doing when there is too much noise. Now look at this month, for example. This is a month of a lot of sales going on. Amazon will have the Great Indian Sale, Flipkart will have the Big Billion Day, right? Now whatever I am doing, how much of that is actually leading to my offtakes on those platforms is kind of tricky, right? So how do we find is a big challenge. How do we find what the offtake is a big challenge. Not as advanced here in terms of the availability of data. So one is sorting what kind of data I need from the dump of data. That's an important problem statement. Second is making it accessible and available. So while the data is there, can I pull it out in a simple format so the teams can actually action on it? That's another piece that at the execution level I've seen break in a lot of times, that you have the data, but it takes like 3 dashboards, 4 reports to pull it out and make sense of it. So that's another thing that that is important. The third piece is when you action it, what does it do to you? Either on your platform or on the marketplaces. For example, I'll give you a very recent example, as recent as today's example. We changed our way of marketing on Facebook a month back, and we were seeing what it's doing really, right? The whole measurement system was that, hey, I'm spending X rupees on Facebook, it's giving me an ROAS, is a return on ad spends measure, you would be aware. So it's giving me an X ROAS, right? How do I increase it? What's doing? Like really struggling to kind of crack it, right? Today we correlated one particular ad to sales on our platform and sales on marketplaces, because marketplaces we still get the secondary data. And we are seeing such a beautiful correlation there, which kind of says that, hey, I shouldn't be looking at the spends here only in the silo of the D2C, but also what it's doing in the offline world, what's doing in the aggregators, marketplaces, all of that, and then kind of come to an ROI equation, right? So yeah.
Sure. Great. Thanks. I mean, thanks for that insight. I think I would quickly now sort of invite Vignesh for a quick commentary here. So you've heard some, sort of things, and I thought I heard some repeated words in terms of data, funneling of data, data journey. So what have your conversations with customer engagement been? I think mapping the data, information gathering, and also to get a 360-degree view, the offline-online integration. These are some across industry agnostic issues that one would definitely come across. So what have been your observations, and what's your quick commentary here, Venkatesh?
Hey, thank you guys. I mean, I'm noting down a lot of themes here, like personalization, identity, measurement across platforms, attribution, interoperability across ecosystems, comprehension, activation of data, etc. All key themes, right? I mean, super interesting, right? And that's something that we ourselves as a brand deal with as well. While I represent the advertising business for Airtel, where we're working with third-party brands, but we ourselves as a large brand ourselves, right? We're probably one of the largest spenders as well. We have a lot of data. We have actually 350 million subscribers on our platform, right? That's like almost 30+% of India's population, so that's a lot of data. And I have similar challenges as well, right? What do we do with so much data, right? So I mean,
where does all the data go?
Yeah, where does all the data go, right? Luckily for us, end of the day, I think we have similar challenges like everybody else. When we go on to acquire customers, we have the same identity issues, we have the same measurement issues. Attribution on social, it becomes a challenge. Walled gardens have their own way of measuring and stuff, so you have to take their word for it. But at the same time, when we have gone to brands, we have also seen that there is also a need for alternatives. We are moving to a cookieless world at some point of time. I think we've heard it enough. It's a deadline which keeps coming and going. But what we've done is that we are also in the looking at how do we activate our data for our own use, as well as how do we get the industry to use it as well, right? For example, we do multiple products. Though we are a telecom company, we also are in the business of TV households. We also sell a DTH platform. We also have a payments bank, so we also acquire customers for banking, so we do have something in common here as well. And we also sell financial services, we also sell OTT subscriptions, right? So we have a 360-degree view of the customer. So we do get a lot of data, and right from the time you insert a SIM into your phone, we know what devices you have, so we know affluence. So every interaction that you have on the phone, we do, I mean, as long as it's privacy safe, we do understand at an aggregate level what each person does, right? So getting all this data, having it in the same conversation, like putting it into a CDP, how do I then activate it, etc. That's something that we have made a lot of progress on, right? And we are hearing this from all brands. So, I mean, I'm with you on every one of the concerns that you have raised out, yeah.
Sure. Great. Thank you. I think as we move along, we'll come back to you for more inputs and even from Avinash as well. So, Vaibhav, let's move on to you here. So, what is personalization, sort of form? Where does it come in the sequence of your customer mapping journey? And where does it really fall into your, is it a pain point, A? And B, how do you strike the balance between looking at a personalization versus scaling the product to sort of democratize it and offer it to a larger market? So where do you stand?
Just to add to that, if you can balance personalization versus privacy, that will be super interesting.
Yes.
How do you personalize and still be privacy
say,
safe?
Yeah, and still say yes.
I represent a B2B business here.
Sure.
So a lot of the data that we have is not based on a lot of activity that users are doing in real time.
Yeah.
So we kind of safe there. So we're not playing with that amount of data.
You're not playing with fire.
Yeah, but in terms of personalization, I think we do map our customer journeys pretty effectively, and we have about 20 plus products. So it becomes a lot more important because each of these products are talking to different industries, catering to different use cases. So when I'm talking to a D2C brand where ease of use and convenience is what they're selling to their end customers, it becomes very important for me to craft communication so that I can effectively communicate that this is the problem you're going to be solving for your customers, and hence there's a need for my business. But when I go to NBFC or a lending company, my conversations are very, very different, right? So that's absolutely important. So we have created different product, different personas, and we have a razor sharp focus on who our TGs are there and what are their attributes, where they're hanging out, where they're talking, what media they're consuming. And having said that, we also have mass marketing, campaigns because there is a, India as a country, we're seeing so many, so much of new businesses coming from tier 2, tier 3, and there we want to put a mass communication kind of a layer. So that's why we partner with right media houses, and we create experiences where we think our TG is going to relate and say, hey, this is the right brand I want to hold hand and work with. So that's the kind of balance we try to maintain. Yeah.
Sure. Ojasvi, moving this question to you as well. So how are you really striking the balance between, scaling the product versus looking at personalization, and if there is a privacy angle to it? Yes. There is, of course, but what's your take on it?
So I think especially it's very difficult because even in your front-end community, you might be experiencing that I just talked about it and I can see it everywhere kind of a situation. So people feel that their privacy is getting intruded, and striking a balance is actually challenging, and to not be creepy is actually challenging. We are all struggling there, I guess. So as much as possible, we are trying to get there by getting all sorts of data, which is mostly a consent related data where user gives their own consent and actually shares a feedback, actually shares their preferences. So that sort of data we are trying to gather more and more through different interactions that we are doing on a regular basis. We are doing feedback calls to add up to the personalization aspect, because we are also dealing with a lot of B2B banks and have similar problems as Razorpay or Cashfree would have, where the range of data that we would get would be from SMEs to enterprises, and both are our target segments. So a lot of conversations we are trying to have so that the privacy is maintained. At the same time, we are getting more segmentation and more user personas in place for the customization bit.
Right. And when you're talking about user personas, what would be most relevant to you?
So for the products that I'm managing, it is basically the SMEs and the investor side, but the other products that we have, we are also looking at large enterprises and the financial requirements that they may have from an alternative financing vertical space.
Sure. So Pooja, so this question comes to you. So from a grow perspective, how are you really looking at the customers from multiple touch points, and what's been the sort of the growth journey from your, from how you've seen it, and what are your user persona challenges here? So I want to know the dichotomy between, personalization versus scale to grow, vis-a-vis how you're able to successfully identify your multiple touch points here. So that would be an interesting thing to hear from you here.
Thank you. In terms of first the personalization part, right? In terms of, I think personalization today has become so much more important. especially for any fintech brand, right? I mean, I remember I won't name it, but say a very large bank, sending out emailers, which talking to like a very, say, affluent person, asking him to take a loan for a very small thing. Now, what happens in that case is the customer actually gets irritated that you don't understand me. And I think that is where, the personalization actually is so much more important. Only when the customer feel that, you understand him and the problem that, he's facing is when you're able to resolve those things, right? In terms of, so I think that's why it becomes far more important to give a context in our, in our world again. If suppose I am telling somebody to start an SIP at 500 rupees, but he's already doing investment of more than 5 lakh rupees. Imagine, what will be his reaction to something like that. And that's why I say creating those kind of cohorts and sending out personalized messages to those people, I think it is very, very important in today's day and age, at least I feel. In terms of the multiple touch point question that you asked, I think that is what, we are really grappling. And I think, what Megha mentioned in terms of, that how, so one is that, your initial part, right, in terms of when you are getting the customer on your platform. I think, at that point itself, because you have offline, online, you are doing something at a different place, the consumer is seeing your ads and or interacting with you at multiple places, and you don't know what is the real source, of how he actually got on your platform. To after that, I think, even retaining or how to engage with them, how to do, say, cross selling, all of those things, I think it further becomes, more and more difficult at this point of time, because the overall journey, how to keep mapping that journey of the customer is becoming more and more difficult. How to keep a track, right? I think, I think you can still keep a track of, say, just the engagement part or just the acquisition part, but to keep a track of the overall funnel is so much more cumbersome, for people to really, make sense out of that particular, say, journey. Then I think that is what people are struggling with, and I think it can only be resolved through personalization or cohorts, creating cohorts, because the more number of data that you have, you will not be able to really come up with the right kind of insights for the consumer. So when you're creating cohorts is when you are actually deep diving, you are able to understand that particular cohort's problem and you are resolving for that. Otherwise, you are resolving for a very large issue, and I don't think it may be relevant for everyone. So it will be that spillover will be so large, and for a fintech brand, I think, it is very critical, in terms of the issue. If I'm not understanding the customer and empathizing with him, I think that is a very critical incident, in the world, in the category itself. So I think it's far more critical, for us to understand the cohorts and everything.
Sure.
Do you think it's more like a wall garden versus non-wall garden issue that I'm hearing? Is that the thing? Because so many, I think you have Apple, which has just launched its own ad tech ecosystem, and they're using their own data. You have Facebook, which is doing that. You have Google, which is doing that. So is that the challenge? I'm just wondering, is that what you feel is the critical challenge, because you're not able to, all these systems don't talk to each other. Everyone has their own source of truth. So is that the challenge? And do you guys are you guys thinking of you have to work with them because there's no alternative?
Different now.
Yeah.
So what happens is that you can't rely on the journey overall, right? In terms of, because you don't know which data is the most accurate one, and there are always discrepancies. So you start with something and then you suddenly realize, okay, this data is not matching this one, and that's where you say you're not trying to, say, get everything together, right? Because then you don't know if it is really making sense or not.
I mean, to your point, I mean, just taking an example, right? So let's say there are multiple channels, right? We like you talked about, there's Facebook, there's Google, there are multiple ad networks, multiple, let's say, partnership platforms. Now, all of them in silos might be reaching out to the same consumer.
Of course.
Right. Now we are spending impression cost, or we are spending click, or whatever the cost model is. So you're spending the same cost for the same consumer across different channels. So that's the problem statement that you talked about. An interesting take to that could be, in maybe not the ecosystem is not as advanced right now, but in the future using blockchain as a way where you decentralize the systems to the extent where all these systems, there is enough the privacy part that you talked about, right? So you maintain privacy, and at the same time you decentralize the attribution, you decentralize the way in which the systems work, where they can interact without letting go of the privacy. So that is one of the futuristic ways in which probably something like this can be resolved. But then again, I don't think today we have that ecosystem in place.
We do. So recently, not that I mean, this is not a sales pitch though, but we recently invested in Achilles, which is a blockchain-based clean room solution where two first-party data sets can interact. And we are a telco, right? We are more guarded about our data, and we are under regulatory scrutiny all the time. Where two first-party data sets can interact without having to give up anything, any PII, right? Personal identifiable information, and you can still build a cohort. For example, let's take the use case, right? Say Nykaa has information about shoppers, since we haven't come to Nykaa, right? My wife is a big fan, but anyway, we have data about users who have certain attributes, right? But probably they don't know where they're located, they don't know the gender, they don't know. And say they probably come to Airtel, right? And then Airtel basically has location data. We know where they stay, we know what their age is, because those are things that are hygiene when you take up a connection, right? How do we put both those two data sets together? You find a common identifier, and then you're able to do it, build a super cohort, apply it. After that use case, delete that data, because you can't hold it, right? It doesn't go back to Nykaa, it doesn't come back to Airtel. Nobody enriches each other's data, but that goes back. So that ecosystem is already there. If you want to try it, I'm happy to connect later.
The only challenge I think over there is the adoption across different
Correct.
platforms.
That is
Because unless everyone adopts that solution, you'll still be left with limited data sets. But yeah, I think it's a step in the right direction.
And I think the problem is that all these walled gardens are literally the last in the lines who would adopt these things.
Yeah.
And most people in this room would actually be dependent on these walled gardens heavily.
That's one thing, right? How do you, what's the Tina? There's no alternative, that's what. So one of the things that we've done is that if you see, we have three ecosystems where there's a digital ecosystem. I don't know how many of you have heard of Wink, the music platform.
Yes,
It's
of
incident,
course.
yeah. So, okay, that's good. Right, we don't do a lot of marketing, so right. So all the entire ecosystem is connected by a phone number. So that is the only a unique identifier across the ecosystem. Somebody takes a phone, but if you have to log into your app, any of these apps require a phone number. So we're trying to solve for that, because we ourselves also cross-sell products, right? As I said, we sell financial services, we sell subscriptions, etc. So we're trying to basically, at least in our ecosystem, have one common identifier so that we can track the same guy who goes on our DTH platform, sees an ad there, and then comes on to my app there, tries to pay his bill. We know that he's coming there. And then probably he's living somewhere else, etc. So we are able to map this across the platform. So identity is a big challenge. But if you're willing to come out if brands are willing to come out of walled gardens and take a punt, I think there are a lot of partners who would be willing to, help. Yeah.
That's interesting.
And that was not a sales pitch.
Of course, didn't sound like that.
Yeah, but I think that was a relevant interjection here. So thanks for that, Vignesh. Let's move on to Preeti right now. So what do you further have to add to Vignesh's commentary here? So what has your journey been like, Preeti, so to speak?
From a business head perspective.
Exactly.
Preeti, because I think a lot of
I can't, comment on a lot of these, but of course these are issues that we keep hearing, and I don't think that necessarily we have all the solutions as people are also sharing. I think it's very easy to go down rabbit holes and to just get lost in the details and to really not know what is it that you're achieving at the end of the day. And that's something that I've seen enough and more happening, at least in our part of the world. But yes, personalization is required. Yes, you need to be careful with how you interact with your consumers, what are you talking to them, etc., etc. But I think let's take a step back. What's actually more important is to realize that till 2, 3 years, 4 years back, nobody would have ever said that let's connect data to that particular person. You were into building brands, and you were into building love for the brand. And I think that whether you are getting a transaction of the mattress or not today, or of the Wow Skin product today or not, but there is a 360 degrees resonance that you're able to create, which is actually what is required for the brand. Because today nobody, especially after the pandemic, uses only one channel. You'll see something in one channel, go back to another channel, go back to another channel, and the walls are so light that you're just moving between channels. So it's extremely important to really invest behind the right kind of content which connects with the cohorts which you feel are your future cohorts.
Yeah.
while it's very easy to go down several cohorts and just keep on getting lost in the bundle, because of course it's also what part of the journey you're in, so which will define how many cohorts you want to get in, whether it's a siloed structure or not. Finally, you also have to understand that unfortunately one person is just not able to do it. It's not that you're doing siloed structures because you enjoy getting 3 heads to speak to each other. It's not that at all. It's just that finally, if there was digital marketing itself is evolving at such an incredible pace, number one. Number two, tech is developing every day. I know, like I joined Nykaa 2 years back, and between 2 years back and today, the number of meetings and the number of implementations that I have seen, it's just insane, right? So if we can't even keep up with tech of our own teams, how do you expect that one marketing person will keep up with all of this and be able to connect the dots? So what I think, at least from a sort of a little bit step back position, is that you really need to understand which is the cohorts that you're going after. How are you building brand love, whether it's offline, online, whether it's in, so anything on Airtel, for example, I'll be very happy to explore, because finally at the end of the day, the consumer is the same, and you're absolutely right. Yeah. If you're anywhere close to a well-off person, then chances are that you are going to be using Airtel.
High-end phone.
Yeah,
right,
and
yeah.
iPhone and Airtel, and then whatever. So there are several levels of connections that you can make there. And while dosa pizza connections are constantly sort of required, I noted that down as well. I think it's constantly required that you are able to prove that thread. And I have someone with me in my team who's doing dosa pizza underwear connections. So you have to understand what level you can get to. So Nishchal one day calls me up and says, you know who bought yesterday? I said, who bought? I said, 3 o'clock in the night, this person has bought 12,000 rupees of underwear. Definitely he was drunk and he doesn't know what he's doing. I'm like, you have the bandwidth to go down to this rabbit hole. You're really losing it. So I'm just saying it's very important for us to keep line of sight on building brand, building content which people come back for, and being present for the consumer. Today, consumers don't have any time. Like within even a new brand, the transactions, I'm sure Wow is also seeing it. Any new DTC brand you launch, there are transactions being made in 1.5 minutes. Now, like what are people up to? Within 1.5 minutes, you've seen a new brand, you've actually put it in cart and you've actually checked out, right? So it's that insane that you really need to get your content right. You need to be present in the right places where your cohort is and really be focused on the cohorts which are working for you. I think that's what we have been about, and I think that's what we are good at. We're really good at building brand love more than anything else. I don't think that if you ask us are we the strongest digital marketers, I don't think so. I think we constantly are complaining and cribbing, and I'm sure all of you would agree if I started to discuss those issues that we have. But just to state that yes, let's build the brand, let's make sure that the content is great and that we are reaching out to the right cohorts is what we're really focused on.
One follow-up question to that, right? I mean, for Nykaa, you're targeting women, right? All your products are towards women. Is that a challenge in the ecosystem? I mean, because we all talk about cohorts. I mean, we talk about very broadly, right? But having we have a challenge as well, because we have a lot of women on a network, but we have a big challenge in identifying them. I'll tell you why.
They always use their husband's credit card.
Husband's credit card and credit. I mean, not just that. I think most of the time it's a practice as well, right? We take a connection and then we take an add-on, and then the wife uses it, so on. So we had this challenge as well, where we had when we came in, we said 10% of our base is women. I was like, no way, that's got to be a lot more women, right? It took us some time to get to 40%, right, of our base where we can actually identify women, right? So that's one thing. But has that been a challenge for you? Very much, right?
Very much. Even today, if you theoretically ask us to say the age of the customer and try and other than actually shadowing or doing a parallel that, okay, this is a lipstick, definitely this is the age of the customer, likely to buy it, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. There is no real way of proving the age of the consumer, really, number one. And number two, I think it'll continue in India. I don't think that finally it is, between the man holding the wallet and how it's being released in parts and not fully, etc., etc. I think it'll continue for a while as well. It's not going to go very easily anywhere.
Interesting. Okay.
Okay, yeah, that's an perhaps a no-brainer at some level. Yeah, great. Thanks, Preeti. Thank you so much. I think we should jump to Vanda at this point of time. So,
You have a question for me?
yeah,
Since you covered it.
yeah, we do have a question for you.
No, I
Yes.
think I'll just paraphrase what Preeti said, right?
Yeah.
You brought alive the entire complexity and how difficult it is, and you have to build the brand love, which is by far the most important thing. And honestly, we really don't have data. We try to make a lot of sense of it, to put method to madness of our lives.
Correct.
Right? But I really like what Megha said in terms of really articulating the 3 points, which are what we face as marketeers, because ultimately dhanda lana hai, right? You need conversions, right? How do you make sense of all this?
Absolutely.
And see, there is data there, and we've always said data is the oil, and we have to really try
Blue
to
oil, yeah.
yeah. And I think paraphrasing a lot of what you guys said is, it's taking baby steps, right? You have to start somewhere. If you let so much of data flummox you, you're really going to go home with a headache every day. So you have to make those baby steps in terms of trying to put method to that. And I think what we do at Fresh to Home, it's easier for us because we own our own platforms, right? So we know our consumer. Yes, it's males buying all the time because the wives are telling them what chicken to buy or what this thing. So we know who's the decision maker, right? But ultimately, it's all these fields which you actually put tags, male, female, location, and it enriches over time. And yes, tech is really non-existent, because if all of us had good tech, we would be really super sharp and So it's important we do things, and I think what we do really well is we use the RFM, which is recency, frequency, and monitoring method. It's very basic, and it starts from there. Everything else emanates from there. You take the cohorts which you want to do, which exhibit recency, frequency, and monitor your AOV, and then you go after them, because ultimately you have to get them to transact. And it's easy in meat and seafood because you can buy 3-4 times a week. So it's frequency is very important. So you make those cohorts. And personalization is key, because you really need to have the customized communication to them, right? So we know in terms of personalization and data privacy, overzealous, companies have done. It's been a gaffe, right? A girl bought a pregnancy kit, and you saw it as customer A. This is the tag. And then in your over-enthusiasm to the address, you send, say, congratulations or a nice thing, which goes to the father. So we know, right? So how much of personalization is good personalization? For example, this consumer who's been buying so much of chicken and fish and, LTV is very good, and you send, okay, but it reaches during Shravan, right? Because they have not transacted, and you think, okay, I'll send it and they will.
You have been quiet for a very long time.
I'm not a liar. So I mean to say, you have to balance it out, and these are real life problems. You start small, you do a lot of campaigns, and you continuously see how it is going, and you get better over time. I mean to say, you have to map the journeys, you have to have, and I take an example from gaming. So gaming has these high end, so gaming is all about adding to the wallet so you can game more. It's called whales. So around 8%, there'll be 8% of these folks who are whales, and they contribute to 40% of revenue. So you have to map those journeys, and then you have to see how you can, make the rest actually exhibit the same by nudging them. So all of us talk about journeys and automation. We've not really got there, and we'll get better. But I think what we do also in terms of personalization is ensure your past purchase behavior, you see how you're buying. And right now, not on the app so much, but at least nudging through communication, SMS, PNs, emailers, we try to actually nudge people to be able to buy, upsell, cross-sell. So it's for each category, it's a different space out there. We are also taking our baby steps in terms of making method out of madness. But I think there's enough and more data, and we should actually start small. Make your mistakes, but I think over a period of time you really get better, and you should really hope for a good tech and analytic team who can actually make this mass of data which you actually have, have more meaning.
Correct. I mean, because it's inundation of data, it can get intimidating
It's
at
very
one.
intimidating.
Yeah,
like
it can get
literally.
very intimidating, and then finally you're like, okay, how much of it is actually relevant to me?
Correct.
You know.
These are existential things on a daily basis we actually see. So we have brand tracks to see how much a brand love, equity, etc. Then we have also our funnel metrics to actually see how do you intersperse it, because there's also ROI, right? Now most investors actually they don't see brand marketing and
Correct.
growth.
So,
They
what's your
actually ask
metrics
you.
building mechanism? How does it work for you, if I may ask you?
So, see, in terms of metrics, if you're saying CS, it's all about NPS is very important, but it gives you an idea of how. But that's a very broad thing, detractors, promoters. But at least to have a sense of what goes, then you actually have your funnel, how you're actually faring, and where you actually through the funnel you can see how metrics are panning out, and you have your brand track. Brand track actually is a harbinger of how your revenue will pan out in the next couple of months. So awareness, spont, consideration. So that gives you a good feeling, because especially in our category, which is essentially a duopoly, you actually have a good understanding of how this comes. And it's very seasonal, right? Because see, it's like Coke, or it's like Chawanprash, which sells in the monsoons or in summer or winter. So for us, during festive, it actually goes downhill. Shraj, Shravan, Navratra. So we know that intent is low. So you also have to see how much of ROI you're going to get basis. And you can't go overboard, right? Because who's going to buy you? So you have to know your consumer, you have to know your business cycles, and then accordingly figure out how to
Sure.
about it.
Sure. Thanks, Vanda. Thank you so much. Hitat, I would want to invite you into the discussion.
Sure. Thank you. So I can maybe summarize for everyone. But jokes apart, so maybe if you have a question, I'm ready
No,
to...
again, see, it will come back to some core questions here.
Sure.
About how are you looking at your metrics building, and is it the same as everyone else? At one level, I think it's a no-brainer. Yes, of course, it comes back to the primary 5 or 6 things that we have been talking about here. So my question would be to anything that you have to add onto it. B, what is your metrics building mechanism? How does it vary for you, and how are you making sense of the data mapping in your organization?
Sure.
And how you taking, how much of this resonates with you as well? Whatever you've heard
a lot,
so far.
because so we are in the finance space, and consumer by their own volition gives us a lot of data, because to serve them better, we need that data. We need that data to process and give them the right offering, give them the right rates. Maybe the chances of approval of a certain loan depends on how authentic and how much additional data you can give me, so that I can better decision and serve you faster. But again, we are in a very unique space, and we are in a very kind of like a challenging position. And why I'm saying this is because 95% of our applicants are men. And that's an unfortunate situation in finance space in India. Maybe a lot of finance folks will agree. But when, let's say, what I do is I invite 100 people to a party, and I only let 3 of them enter, right? Because you can't give credit to everyone, right? If you give credit to everyone, you'll go bankrupt. And unfortunately, Indians are not really good at rejection. So it all goes to our Play Store and App Store ratings, right? And that's a very unique problem. But how do you deal with that, right? So that's where personalization comes into picture. That's where, and by the way, one more thing is that why I'm rejecting a certain person, I can't even let them know, because eventually they'll start gaming the system, right? They'll maybe start inputting incorrect data, and then the whole thing will collapse. So this is where we have built a lot of 1:1 mapping through a whole funnel. I'm pretty sure a lot of us deal with funnels day in and day out. But the time spent from going from one point to another point inside an app, that's connected to my marketing automation, and with the data that the consumer has given me, with some 5 other data lakes that I already have, right? From credit bureau, from first party data that the consumer gives, from what channel I'm acquiring that customer, whether it's coming from a partnerships, which is already like a curated data, or coming from a walled garden like Facebook, Google, and Apple. So all of this gets tied into my marketing automation system. And there are journeys that we have built in, that if the user gets rejected at a certain point, this is the answer that you can probably say. Now again, that's not foolproof. Half the times, I won't say it's half the times, but a lot of times it just like you're doing a hit and miss. But that's where maybe balancing the logic and the magic of marketing is coming into picture. What we do as a practice is every quarter we just completely scrap up all the communication angles that we have been investing in, quickly go back and try and wrapper that around in a new format. Obviously, there are a few ones which last more longer than a quarter, but that's something that as a practice that we've been building. I think a lot of us had given some kind of an input around hits and miss. So one miss that I feel, and I've set this up over the last 7 years, millions of data points. One miss that I think maybe marketers don't really realize is when a customer is engaging with a certain channel, you have sent an SMS and the customer has clicked on that link. I'm not sure how many of us are actually taking that feedback and adding that to our marketing intelligence, right? Because today marketing automation systems have started doing something that if, let's say, typically what consumers will do is they'll create a cohort, they'll create a segment, shoot and campaign at around maybe 10 o'clock because that's when most of people go to office and there's a high chance of opening it up. But marketing automation systems today, what they are doing is they are able to actually serve and send the email at a certain point when maybe Sudeep would have opened the last email, or there is a pattern behind it. So that's where AI comes into a little bit picture. But this is a miss that maybe a lot of us have not really thought of. Had I done this maybe a year back, I would have been in a very different league. But yeah, that's how we are trying to map it.
Sure. Quite an interesting comment. Maybe at this point of time should just kind of invite Avinash into the discussion. Avinash, you've heard a lot of people, and I think Vignesh also added some of his points here. So from a I think you distinctly converse with the enterprise side of the business. So how has it really panned out for you over, say, the last decade in terms of the various customer conversations you've had, A, and B, now that Hitat has touched upon, the sophistication of the automation systems as far as digital marketing and marketing automation goes, how do you think AI has really changed the picture for customers? So if you could just give in some...
Okay, thanks so much for that. I have noted down several points and I need to go back and get an education on some of the terms, right? I'm not a marketer. I have not done marketing at all for a lifetime. I've only sold, and that to tech, to mostly CXOs, CIOs. Sudeep knows what I'm talking about. But let me sort of take you back, on the philosophy that we really have. We have the B2B arm, which is pretty much representative of the personality of Airtel. Airtel basically used to sell SIM, and the market size of the population of the country. The minute you start crossing a teledensity of 80%, you do not know what to do next, right? You don't have, any left out market base. So B2B has been exactly the same space. We had been in a business 5 years back. We offered basically connectivity to organizations. Some of your organizations use us. And we have nearly about 40-45% share of market, very tall, roughly about $2 billion in terms of turnover. 2,000 enterprise customers, all of them, nearly all of them consumed something from us. And we were growing at a whopping 5% per annum. That was a problem, right? Because we just did not know anything else other than connectivity. We changed the game. 2-3 points, right? Which is contextual to what we spoke about. We changed the game from distinguishing between the customer and the consumer, right? The customer is the CXO, the CIO for us. And there's a lot of perspective being taken, how, where, what, and all that. We slowly changed the perspective from a B2B standpoint to focusing on the consumer. And I'll come back to that in a bit. The second thing that we did is that we were selling for commercial value 10 years back. 6 to 7 years back, we were selling for technical value. My solution is better. Sir, mera network chalega, uska nahi chalega, right? Mere paas 4G hai, yeah, I have fiber. Which quickly, over a period of time, became a stale conversation. So we moved up from commercial selling for commercial value, to technology value. Now we're selling for business value. And believe you me, it has been an uphill task as such. So the change in orientation that the business has been able to bring about is customer to consumer. Instead of CIO, you focus on who's consuming your technology and everything around his life, as I mentioned. I'll run you through 2 quick examples, which I'm personally very close to. When the pandemic started, people ran away from offices back into home. Roughly 99% of population in the IT tech industry, about 40 lakh people, used to work from 9 cities, and 65% of them moved to about 60 plus cities, right? You can imagine what happened to the network. We used to only serve campuses, and suddenly these massive consumers who should sit on campuses just walked away into Bellary, Chittur, Raebareli, and what have you, as against what we call Outer Ring Road right now. Yeah. They moved out from what we call rented, paying guest accommodation to their own houses, and so on and so forth. And our business was to connect offices. And suddenly the businesses just disappeared. Offices were empty, at least as far as the IT industry is concerned. We went around focusing on that individual who works from home, and the insights that we got around it, the data that we were able to collect, completely, not just changed our revenue stream and the product profile, it changed our purpose, as an organization. We look at where is he living, what's his age bracket, whom is he staying with, what is he doing before, and what will he do 2 years down the line. A lot of time was spent on behavior of this individual in the future. We did a lot of 360-degree research, government, retail, leaders, and the employees, to basically get to know what are you going to do in the future. And before the IT industry, I think we had clarity as to what this individual is going to do from a predictive point of view, looking at various data points, and I'll not get too deep into that. And we centered our solution. The CEO, the CIO, etc. is not so important. The HR leader is not so important. It is this individual. He does not pay me for the connection that the IT company centrally pays. We created a solution which was absolutely out of whack. It was not at all, it was impressing the CIO, not at all the employee. They just threw it off. We refreshed it, we revised it, we fine-tuned it, and now we're seeing adoption, right? It's centered around making his life easy, solving his business problem, right? His business problem is, I don't want to be thrown out of a Teams call when I'm in a global review. Bas uska itna hi kaam hai, because it's very embarrassing. After 3 minutes you log in, for me, right? It's his, uski izzat ka sawal hai, so to say. So we solved for that, right? And now this individual is carrying the message without its referral value, without anything from us. He's carrying the messages across the company. Attrition in the IT industry is 25%. These guys are carrying it across industries, across organizations as such. It's a tremendously successful program. We're seeing traction, very slow traction, but yes. The second example, there are several, but let me take what we did with Sudeep, as such. About a couple of years back, we reached out and they were on a solution. Every time you take a delivery from Swiggy, you call the agent. It's basically, he doesn't see a number and there's privacy and so on and so forth. We understood, and we are selling for technology, and we said, oh my God, you are paying a crazy amount, and that company is not great and stuff like that. I'll give you 30% discount. And we were in conversation. But thanks to one of our account managers and one of our solutions guys, very passionate, they understood the journey of the delivery boy. They understood the journey of the customer. And they, by the way, understood the behavior of the restaurant also. So if you do not know the amount of meetings that we have done, the team went and visited 10 restaurants. And of course, the behavior of individuals and delivery boys. And the whole focus changed on how to make the experience a little better by, moving a little bit nudge here and there. When we started with the Swiggy, we were only masking the calls between the delivery boy to the consumer. Then we did it on reverse basis. We figured out there was a need to reverse mask as well. And now, through those, by understanding deeply the consumer, we are now delivering an interaction between the chef or the restaurant and the consumer. I want it a little spicy. and that's a call you can make to the chef, and it's completely on our platform. And there's so much of, not much revenue from there, but there's so much of gratitude that we got from, Swiggy, and there is so much of the guy who really solved the problem became a star, and so on and so forth. So in a summary, we are on a slightly different journey wherein all our potential customers are already our consumers, and the experience defines what is going to, further procure from me. Secondly, it's the consumer which really matters, and the data that you have around it as to what you can do further on, and that's a journey, as such. So just to give you a sense, you'll get to know a little, the difficulty around my job. In the morning, we speak about connectivity. In the afternoon, we speak about cloud. Then we talk about connectivity platforms, communication platforms. And now we are talking about Airtel Ads, right, as a B2B marketplace. And the central reason that we are consolidating this, of course, the brain is, Vignesh, is that the team is now, we want to focus on the consumer and we want to focus on business value. So that's a little bit of a journey that we have had: serve to sell, consumer focus, move the decision a little more downward into the ground, driven through experience. Sorry about the long answer, but that's what it is.
Great. Thank you so much, Avinash. I mean, I think, and the use cases you stated were very interesting. And I think at some level, even as users, we kind of tie back that experience to what you just said. Yeah. So very quickly here, sort of maybe to kind of understand, maybe we'll have a quick commentary from each one in terms of what exactly are those one or two things that you're re-looking from a customer, sort of engagement perspective. So, your answer could be like sort of something you may have broached upon the conversation or something you've not brought up so far. What are those one or two things you're actually looking at? Maybe this is a future sort of an answer that you can look at. So I'll start off with Megha.
Sure, I think most things I've touched upon, but I think one thing I'm going to take cue from what Avinash was talking about, because I really like this story. I think as we think about powering growth with relevant audience, one thing that's important is building on a word of mouth or organic coefficient. When we truly understand our consumers and provide the experience that they want, for you it was that, I don't want to come to a meeting 3 minutes late. That's embarrassing for me. For Meesho, it is providing the right assortment at right pricing, at the right quality. If we do that, automatically your consumers, 350 million for Airtel, whatever, 150 million for Meesho, they become your spokespeople. And they drive a huge amount of growth. Sorry about that. They drive a huge amount of growth. And we've all been talking about creating cohorts and driving relevant messages. Now imagine these 150 million people. They have their cohorts. They have the people they are talking to. And they're going to talk exactly what you want them to deliver. So they can become actually a huge growth engine for you. So I believe that focusing on what drives the core flywheel for any business and doing that really well will build on this word of mouth and can be a huge growth lever.
Sure.
I'll stop there.
Great. So let's move to Nitin here. Yeah. Your take on this?
I think I sort of had a similar theme to what Megha mentioned, right? I think as marketeers, maybe we focus a lot on communication, advertising, so on and so forth, but experience is one aspect that's truly critical for us to also keep a sharp eye out. Again, specifically, right, like currently the industry that I belong to is insurance, right? And as a young brand, you are up against legacy players who carry the brand equity of an HDFC, of an ICICI, right? So like a lot of initial success that we've seen was on the basis of the experience and the value that you were able to deliver to the customer at the moment of need. Like I'll just give a small example, right? I think for insurance, the moment of truth that a lot of time actually comes in when you have a claim, right? And that's a part of the consumer journey that's like really been ignored by a lot of the legacy players, right? So all the moments of delight that we were able to create there, I think, went a long way in terms of creating a flywheel, which was very organic for us. Right, like right from a perspective of somebody who had insured his phone via us on Amazon, right? And when his phone screen broke, and the fact that we were able to reimburse and settle within 2 hours prompted that guy to actually trust us for insurance for his family, right? So the I think the power of little moments of delight that we can create for consumers, if you take an experience view, I think that's I think a key area of focus that as marketeers we should not let go. I think communication and advertising is the glory part of it. I think experience is truly what sells.
Sure. Great. So let's move the question to Smita now. Yeah.
Yeah, again, like what they mentioned, all this while we focused on building consumer demand, but the demand is not so many in volume, right? So how do you make sure that every one consumer that you interact with, you leave a positive, even if they don't convert, because conversion can happen even basis price. We are not the most cheapest brand. We are a premium brand. But how do you leave a positive impact? So the mid part of the journey and the post purchase is what's become very important to us for now, because the brand salience has happened. As per our brand tracks, we're a very close number 1, number 2. So for us, that is now critical. So we are looking at marketing and connecting the dots, not only between our tech platforms of advertising, but tech platforms on supply chain, CXOs in supply chain, in IT. And what you mentioned actually is something that we can experience, and the way we are thinking as a business, where the CIO and CTOs are actually more connected with business process owners, and they're serving us internally, right? So that actually makes a huge difference in really understanding what finally that tech is. Otherwise, it's all rocket science, finally the business owner does not understand. So that's the difference we are also seeing internally. And we are able to really take the voice of the consumer to these processes to say things like, everything is fine, the consumer wants the brand, but 24-hour delivery is like, if they don't get the mattress in 24 hours, they'll go convert for another brand, right? And it's not easy in this category to give 24 hours. It's not, food or grocery. So things like that become very important. So how do you really connect the dots, not only from your advertising platforms, but also to your internal tech platforms, which are non-advertising? I think that's the need of the hour for our business, and that's what we are looking at. Yeah.
Super. Thank you. Thank you, Smita. Vaibhav?
Yeah, I think most of the points have been covered, but I think with so much data and so many platforms and first party, third party, walled gardens, I think we're sort of trying to push efficiency through the data, and we're not sort of thinking about long term. We're only thinking about short term. We're thinking about demand generation, and we're not thinking about demand creation as much. And I think as marketers, we have to balance out. Like, we have to bring a strong brand, like Preeti had mentioned, but you have to create that brand love, so that for long term you're creating demand and not just catering the demand that currently exists. And I think a brand can be made by understanding customer and creating those experiences, like I think Nitin had pointed out. And you have to really spend time in understanding the customer. So in our business, for example, if the customer is a small business, then it's very important for him to get onboarded quickly. He can't wait for 3 weeks. It's very important for him to understand that, hey, if there is a problem, I can reach out to this brand at any given point in time. I don't have to have any revenue loss. But at the same time, if I'm talking to an enterprise, then I have to talk to enterprise about the scale, about the reliability, about security. So it's and once you build your brand across these levers, you I think Megha was also mentioning, this become your growth lever, and suddenly you start getting so many advocates about your brand.
Sure.
Stop there.
So moving it to Pooja.
So not too many new points, but I think just one point that I personally I feel is a struggle, especially in a category like ours. Because it's not very penetrated. So whatever communication you are giving out is actually reaching out to a very large audience. And how do you really identify the audience? So right now it is only somebody who's interested in doing investment. So if they are doing some keyword search, is how you can identify that audience. But if there is another way to identify, say, them better, not just through, say, these kind of keywords, I think that is what, identifying that relevant audience in different ways, so that you are being more sharp At the same time, you're reaching out to the newer audience and not just in a singular way. I think that is say one piece I think is a struggle in some ways.
Sure, sure. So, Preeti, anything to add here?
I think I just thought that it'll be good to explore Airtel's trying to explore the whole walled garden approach and see if we can get into blockchain or whatever is the way around it. I think it'll be lovely to explore that. That's the thing.
Okay, so that's
I've done my job.
Not trying to say.
yeah. So I just sort of thought I should just play the bridge. Dushant, anything quickly?
I think it's difficult to summarize in the later half of a marketers meeting. But I have one point I think that will change. I think in the next 2 years, this cookieless world essentially says that don't take information that's not available to you and take information that people have given you. That's what happened in the cookieless world before the internet, right? Someone walked into your store and you asked them, what do you want? And then gave them great content on the window shelves, telling them, hey, I have great things to show you, so why don't you come back? So I think in 2 years, apart from, I think brand will remain the universal truth of marketing always. But I think we'll have to focus more on creating great content so that people give you that information that you need. Marketers are going to be in a place where you can't pay and get that information from a third party. You're forced to make good content to get that information. I think that will be a big change, which is what the most famous campaigns did 20 years back, right?
Correct. Content and data. So we get to hear these words constantly. Yeah, I'll throw the question back to Sudeep here.
Very similar thoughts actually. At the core, humans are emotional beings, right? So storytelling is an important thing which you all resonate with. We moved to from a word which was all about storytelling to a word which was all about data and very little storytelling, right? I think the next evolution is to marry the two and say, how do I use data and tell meaningful stories, right? So content piece that Preeti mentioned is very, very important there. A large part of focus, I think, for us will be to focus on the content, because in my journey, I've seen that we have moved too extreme to data and said, yeah, data hai, let's just execute something. But what is the message? Like, is it building love? Is there a human insight behind it? Those kind of things, right? So that marriage of the two, data and emotions, that's the next evolution where, we see a lot more use of data with the storytelling.
Sure. Ojasvi.
So I'll talk both on the financial side and on the tech side. Being into the financial space, both on the B2B and the B2C side, what I think is essential is if people are trusting you with so much data, the security angle of it is also like some sort of responsibility that comes into picture. How do you strike the balance between that would be like coming forward. I think that will be more important, especially on the fintech side, and then the compliance is always there because you are regulated. So how do you stand to be compliant and maintain the security while people are trusting you with so much data and so much information related to their financials to you? So I think that would be an important aspect of it.
Sure, great. I think I'll move to Hitarth.
Great. So, as I said, the problem remains the same for me. But that actually inspired us to create more products. And with that, what happened is if I was inviting 100 people to the party, I now don't reject 97. I maybe reject only like some 75% of it. But by giving them the right solutions that, okay, you came for a certain product, maybe you are not really, I can't serve you today. And there is a big chance, and that actually happens, that a lot of them churn out, right? After a bad experience, how do you get the same customer again through your limited channels with all the...
And second chances are rare now.
Second chances are rare. So my problem statement in the job is that how can you like get the same customer again? Obviously, it doesn't happen as frequently. It happens over a long period of time, but still keep them in the orbit of your brand and your products and the larger message that he has taken away. And then try and, the moment you get a second chance with your, and that's where my personalization kicks in. That's where the automation that we have set up kicks in. The customer gets to a landing page, they can see that, okay, there's a name, hi Hitarth, We are glad you came back again. Now that's where the magic starts happening, right? During the second chances. The person goes from there to the app. Inside the app, again, there is a curated offer for that guy. It's not that he's going to go through the same hoops again second time. We try and like minimize those friction points as much as possible. So that's been the story. Now with newer products, our challenge, I wouldn't say challenge, but the viewpoint is how can you make more products go across more such segments that that have been there for the last few years. So that's going to be my focus.
Sure. So very quickly from Ishan.
Yeah, I think very interesting points in the final part of the discussion, and particularly I could relate to what Hitarth mentioned, being from the same industry. So, so talking more from an acquisition standpoint on the consumer experience part. So one of the key challenges that we face primarily as a personal loan or a credit platform is to be able to identify the exact offering that you have to provide, let's say even in case of credit, and to what extent, right, without any buy-in from the consumer outright. And the biggest drop-off point, like I think Hitarth mentioned in the previous part, is that if you don't give them the right limit, or if you reject them at a later stage after they have given a lot of information about themselves, then that becomes a very sour experience for the consumer. So now how you can create a journey where at the outset, with the data that maybe the consumer has given, like I think Dushyant and Sudeep mentioned, with some storytelling or creating a better brand, or with the third party data, with the consent or with the right kind of mechanisms and compliances that you get, where at the outset you're able to identify that this consumer, for this particular consumer, this is the product that I'm going to provide to this consumer, and to what extent, to what limit, so that if we are relevant to the consumer, then we are able to give the information, give that assurance to the consumer outright, or at least we save the consumer from an experience that they might not like, because that's where the word of mouth goes bad, right? So for me, I think that's the biggest challenge from a product marketing standpoint that we're working on, that how at the outset of the journey, via predictive analytics, via more educational ways, we are able to identify what and how much about the consumer or to the consumer, and communicate that well, so that the expectations are set at the very beginning.
Sure, great. Yeah. So, Vanda, your closing comment on this.
The challenges I want to overcome, the first one is there's a sea of data. How do we put sense to this? So a good collaboration, as you said, between all the CTO, product head, everybody, to actually work not in silos, but work seamlessly, so that we have meaningful MarTech data, which gets better conversions. A unified view of the consumer across different touch points is important, and personalization is key. So how do you send out communication with tugs at your heart, which is relevant? I think if you do these two things, we'll be in a better place.
Great. I mean, thank you all so much for your insights. I think some messages were universal, and some messages kind of specific to each of you. I think what resonated a lot in today's discussion was the fact that making sense out of data, bringing out more meaningful stories, and identifying your audiences is one thing, but how are you going to really sustain them in the long and short journey, and what does it really take to sort of, what are those different departments? Tech, I think I kind of sort of liked what Smita and what Megha and even Vanda finally said is, I think the collaboration between the different LOBs and with tech is what is going to drive the future journey in customer engagement. So I think without further kind of sort of holding ourselves to having discussions offline, I think we are sort of very spontaneous off there as well, and let's get on to dinner and sort of network outside. Avinash and Vignesh will be very much around, and you can talk to them and explore more. And Vignesh, thank you so much for your insights. And Avinash, thank you so much for your insights as well. The team is around. We can have more discussions, and we can discuss also all our fun facts. Okay, and maybe pull each other's leg on a lighter note. So on that note, let's take a step outside. Thank you so much on behalf of ET BrandEquity as well as Airtel. Thank you so much for your time. I think it's an evening well spent, and I hope it doesn't rain before we get out of here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.